Okay, here we're going to show how to create your first Selenium test using the Selenium IDE. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up the IDE in the Tools menu. And we're going to get over here so we can see what we're doing while we are using the tool, using the website. And you want to start on the website, on the page that you're going to be using as the initial setup for your test. Each test, you have to think about where it's going to start in. You can either, in the case of login, or it's going to be the first test run, that would probably start on the home page. Subsequent tests, if you're going to run them in sequence, you want to make sure that each test picks up where the last one left off. So in this case, the place to start is obviously the login screen. Now when you launch Selenium, you can see that it does start in record mode. So anything you do while while you're after you initially pop this up is going to get recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and stop record mode. Let's clear these things out. These are just incidental clicks, I think, that happened while I was just speaking. All right, when you're ready to record actions, you can go ahead and click record. Now, one thing to keep in mind: Selenium IDE does not record the times or the pauses that you incorporate into your clicks or typing. So that's good and bad. On the one hand, if you have to stop for 10 minutes to look something up or think about something, that won't be put into the test on its own. On the downside, sometimes you do need to incorporate pauses, like for things like the search index to get reinitialized, or for pages to finish loading, things like that. In that case, you need to put those pauses in manually, and I'll talk about how to do that in a moment. So, but just to do a basic login, let's go ahead and click the record button, and we'll go in here and we're going to put in our data here. And you can see as you type or create other actions in the window, these commands will queue up in your test case. So when I click this login button, you're going to see over on the left we're going to get some new commands showing up in there. Okay, and that launches the load. Now at this point we have everything that we need. Actually, I can see that there was a problem, but we're going to go ahead and stop this recording, and we can test it. Now looking over here, I can see that for some reason the IDE did not capture our typing in the password text area. That might have been because my password had been saved in there already. I'm not sure. Probably because the password that was entered was the same. The password that I typed in was the same as the password that was entered in there. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in as its own step. So this is basically the editing phase. After you've done a record, you can go back in and you can make a number of changes. So this is one change I know right away that we need. So I'm going to insert a new command. And we can basically copy this command right here. So you can see it has a command type, it has a target, and it has a value. So we'll say type, in here, go to the command box, say type, then we have the target, and it should be ID equals, I think it might be password. I'll have to double check that. And then we type in what the password is. Now if you're using something like Firefox, which you should probably be, for Selenium IDE, you can do things like right-click on an element and get its information. So you can see here that the actual ID for the input box is actually user password. Okay, we can close that up. And at this point we have a possible test case. So let's go ahead and save it. We'll give it a name. And we will save this test case. Login test case. And these are actually stored as HTML files, so you can give an HTML extension. Extension is not strictly necessary though. Now we can play it back and see how it does. Now I know there's going to be some problems with this, even after we've added the ID for the correct ID for the user password. We can put this down to speed, down to slow, so we can watch it run. We have two buttons. This runs the entire test suite, which in this case is still just one test case. Or we can run the single test case. So let's go ahead and let's run that. So you can see as the green items go by, what each thing happens. And you can see that the test does run successfully. Now, we don't have any checks in place, so if there was an error, the system really wouldn't detect that. So we do need to add a verification step, at least one verification step. And in this case, what we want to look for is some particular text that shows up after the login is completed successfully, but we know won't show up if the login is unsuccessful or some error occurs. In this case, I'm going to pick this search text. So what we can do is we can right-click on that and look down here, and we get some options. One of the options is wait for text present. So we can go ahead and select that, and it'll add that command in. And this is a verification step. If this step fails, then the test will fail. Now, I actually think that this is that this should be sufficient. There's two different versions. You can say wait for text present. You can say verify text present. Obviously, if you say verify, it looks for it right away. With wait, Selenium just kind of pauses until a text shows up or until it times out, which would be an error. So let's go ahead and start again. We're going to run this test. So we'll log out so that we can start it again. So again, I'm going to set this, make sure the speed is set slow so I can see what's happening. And we'll click play. And you can see as each step goes through, you can see it happening in real time. And here it is waiting for the text, chat this search. And when that pops up, you can see that we get one successful test run and no failures. So this test was a success. Now, how can we be sure that that this was correct? Well, let's go ahead and let's log out. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and change my password. So if my password is different, we know that this login test should fail. You should always make sure that if you put in a verification step that your test can fail, especially with Brain, because we do have a lot of hidden text and things like that. So sometimes if you, for example, are, if we scroll down here and you can see things like the lead organization. Well, the only lead organization it shows right now is OD-OER. But the text for all the other organizations is actually present on the page in hidden areas. So if you were looking for that for a particular organization, no matter which organization you're looking for, it's going to show up. So you want to make sure that your specific verification steps are actually failable. In other words, that if things don't go the way you expect, that things actually fail. So let's go ahead and change my password. So we'll go ahead and do that. And okay, so that closes that. That saves that up. So let's go ahead and run the test again. Now that I have a new password, I expect that this test should fail. Let's go ahead and remove these so you can see as the test runs, as things come in. There we go, Crowley, password. Okay, so now you can see clearly, as a human, we can see that this test has failed. So far, Selenium is still waiting for that test case. I believe it has a timeout of maybe 30 seconds, so it's going to take a little while, but at some point we should see this, instead of before we had a success in the green, we should see a failure in red. So let's just give it a second here. Okay, and there you can see we had one test run in green, but we still do have that one failure. So out of one test run, the only test was also a failure. So that's the basics of setting up a test. One thing you want to keep in mind, as I said, make sure your tests can fail, but at the same time, make sure that your verification steps are not so specific that any little change in the system is going to cause them to give a false positive. So for example, we're pretty sure we're not going to change that text chat this search. On the other hand, we may move it from one location to another. So if your verification step is being so specific that it's looking for the text in a specific field area or with a specific CSS selector, we may come in a case where moving the text around or changing the color of it or who knows what may cause the test to fail. So that's something you want to be aware of.